Dear beloved creator of all that is, we acknowledge this source energy that emanates abundance and love at all times, non-stop, 24/7. When we are reminded to carry this awareness as fully as possible, and this is the truth and the light of who we are, in a divine creation filled with abundance, life, love, and beauty, we are sustained. Were it not for the darkness of evil, our world would be very different. To many, if not most, unimaginably so. Evil is tricky. It is at times invisible, other times visible. Some deny its existence, but for those of us who allow ourselves to see into the abyss of the darkness that is evil, it cannot be unseen and cannot be forgotten. Once seen, we witness it running in the background of every influence and institution it has infiltrated. There's nothing that evil has not infiltrated. Thus, humanity's mission is this. Once seen, and how horribly insidious vile evil is, it must be called out. No sweeping under the rug, no ignoring, no allowing for it to masquerade in its multitude of forms to trick us into believing it doesn't exist. As surely as the slightest trickle of water etches a stone, so does evil permeate and destroy all it touches. Evil needs magic spells and human energy to survive. Our job is to stop feeding it with our compliance and our anger or ignoring. It is a death cult. All we need is faith in our Creator for the magic of life to thrive. The consciousness of humankind is on a journey now, faster than ever, and our job, our purpose, is to stay in our knowingness that we are of the divine creation that is the positive stuff of life energy, creating beauty and all permeating love. And so it is.
Thank you, Charlie.
My pleasure.
My name's Ron Vroom, and I'm the old man talking head of the Oregon Statewide Jural Assembly. With me this evening is Charlie and William. Charlie, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Charlie White. I'm a director of the Action Committee for the Oregon Statewide Jural Assembly.
I'm William Appel. I'm on the Portland, Oregon area here. I do the technology, TV show, websites, Facebook, YouTube.
And a hell of a lot more too. Thank you, William. Thank you, Charlie.
Yes.
I asked to do this earlier this week and nobody objected too strenuously, so this is what I'm going to start with. If Charlie would like to say something before I get going, the floor is yours, Charlie.
Well, earlier you had talked about what you wanted to discuss, and I gave my 2 cents. And I'd like to start out, first of all, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I know that what I'm hearing anyway is that people are cutting out the word under God. And nowhere in that pledge does it say anything about democracy. So these are issues that I think would be really beneficial for us to address, because we're really needing to educate our community as we learn the importance of words, and how when people say that they're proud citizens, or they are a Democrat or Republican, or they hate one or the other party, these are all words that are thrown around, and they have emotional charges for people. They've been made that way. And we really need to get down to the basis of what these words are even meant. They're triggers, so that we can't even have a logical discussion with one another without there being emotion. And we've lost the ability, because of these charges, to be able to even have a political or religious discussion or spiritual. So I would like to one of the things that I recommended was that we would use this as an educational opportunity for not only politicians who need to understand the difference in the jurisdictions between de jure and de facto, common law versus commercial law, and also educators who have no clue about anything that we're talking about here for the most part. And I yield.
I'd like to add governance, self-governance.
Yes.
Into that.
Being governed versus governing ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a good portion of our populace in Oregon here that might actually need to be governed, but it's not me.
Correct. And that is where we get into.
I've known you for a while. You two don't need to be governed either, but you know.
No, we do not. Yeah, these are all definitions of words too. Government, for example, govern means to control, and ment means mind. So why do we need that? Why do we need to be controlled by anybody? And the whole issue of freedom is something that everyone has their own definition. They have a perception of freedom, but what is freedom really? So these are all important words, thoughts to be able to define and chew on.
Let me read a little of this. It seems to me that this is true, or at least it's not a lie for the convenience of another. There are as many devious, greedy, lascivious, ludicrous, bad, and possibly evil people in this rabbit hole we have entered seeking a return to a constitutional republican form of government. That is sad. However, the bell curves demand there be a balance among those in the de facto, and that is good. People in the de jure jurisdiction are just people, much like the persons in the de facto that think they are people. It's mindset. Once you get it, you've got it. Until then, you're wrestling with it all the time. I just read Article 3 and followed it with Amendment 7. I wonder how many people besides me and maybe Richard actually read Article 3 and then Amendment 7 for pleasure. Yeah. Anyhow, we are correct. There is no doubt about it. All power is inherent in the people. All the persons employed with the incorporated, allegedly defunct state of Oregon or state of Oregon, the Kate Brown Article 7 amended oligarchy, aka the city of Portland is a subdivision of the county of Multnomah, is a subdivision of the state of Oregon, is a subdivision of the United States. That is not a lawful government. Government is not incorporated. Therefore, it is de facto. See Black 6, page 416. I got it right here. Read also de facto adoption. Interesting juxtaposition of de facto moving into de jure. The only time I know of it. De facto contract, de facto court. See court, Black 6, page 362. De facto government. Read it, it'll pop your eyes. De facto judge, de facto marriage, de facto officer, de facto segregation, and de facto taking. Anybody got anything they want to say on that right to start with?
Yeah, they took everything into de facto.
Yeah, they had to, including me and you with our all cap name.
And the marriage certificate, everything.
Yep.
In one big fell swoop of de facto.
Yes. So anyhow, I have Black 6 here. And I wanted to read de facto adoption and a bit more. De facto, an agreement to adopt according to the statutory procedures in a given state, which will ripen into de jure adoption when the petition is properly presented. Now, I thought that was very interesting. The de facto presents an adoption, and then it will ripen from de facto, which is false and illegitimate, into de jure, which is true and honest. I like that. I thought a lot of that when I read that. The next one, de facto contract, one which has purported to pass the property from one owner to another, but is defective in some element.
I have a question for you before you continue, if I may. So when you're reading this from edition 6, I have edition 11. When you look it up in your dictionary, is it right there or does it refer you to another page?
For which one?
Okay, well, let's start with de facto adoption.
Yeah, it says in the matter of the estate of Schultz, 220 OR 350 348, page 2D 22, and equitable adoption.
Okay, so, but then does it have that definition that you just gave for de facto adoption right there, or does it refer you to adoption?
No, it's right there.
So I want to just point something out and see if this is right or not. So I am referred to de facto adoption in edition 11, and I'm supposed to see adoption. Now, is this an example of de facto color of law changing definitions so that adoption is simply adoption rather than de facto adoption?
Outstanding.
As in Amendment 7 versus original amendment or original 7th of, yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to look up adoption because it's very interesting to me.
Yes, I have an adopted daughter living in Texas now.
So if I look for adoption, they have all kinds of adoption here, but this was de facto adoption. Okay, yeah, so it refers to a generic adoption, and then it does have specifically de facto adoption. I was just wondering if it just went to adoption, period, but
does it have the same thing that it ripens from de facto to de jure?
It says, this is de facto adoption 1943, an adoption that falls short of the statutory requirements in a particular state. The adoption agreement may ripen to a de jure adoption when the statutory formalities have been met or if a court finds that the requirements for equitable adoption have been met. Also termed equitable adoption, adoption by estoppel.
Yep, they're manipulating it again.
Yeah. So that's just a term that maybe we can address too at some point, color of law. Go ahead with your definitions.
Okay. De facto court tells me I have to go to court and read court. Court is like 2 pages. And it goes from like a space that is uncovered to a legislative assembly to a person and the suit of a sovereign. You've heard people say, my court starts in front of my toes. If you're a sovereign, that's where it starts. Anyhow, back to de facto. De facto government, this one is great. One that maintains itself by a display of force against the will of the rightful legal government and is successful. at least temporarily, in overturning the institutions of the rightful legal government by setting up its own in lieu thereof.
That's flabbergasting.
That's in their own law books. They write down exactly what they're doing. And then it says, see Wortham versus Walker, 133 Texas 255 128 Southwest 2D. Boy, but it's been tried in the Supreme Court, and that's what it's been found. Amazing. De facto judge, a judge who functions under color of authority, but whose authority is defective in some procedural form. Article 7 amended.
Mhm.
And they say to me, well, we don't recognize your court. And they're the ones that got, oh God.
Not their option to recognize us. We should
Yeah.
recognize them.
Well, we don't.
I know.
De facto officer, one who, while in actual possession of the office, is not holding such in a manner prescribed by law. Hello, Kate Brown. De facto segregation. Segregation which is inadvertent and without assistance of school authorities and not caused by any state action, but rather by social, economic, and other determinants. And then de facto taking. This type of taking occurs when an entity clothed with power of eminent domain substantially deprives an owner of the use or the enjoyment of his property. And that was also settled by the Supreme Court.
Interesting description of clothing.
Tell me.
Oh, I don't remember what you said, what it read exactly, but it said in exceptional clothing or something to that effect. What was the definition? Someone comes along.
Was that the office?
The last one you.
Oh, segregation?
Yes.
De facto segregation?
No.
De facto taking?
Yes.
De facto taking, the type of taking occurs when an entity clothed with power of eminent domain.
Clothed with power.
Yes. Black robes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you guys know the story of 1000 Southwest 3rd Avenue, Portland. Liar, liar. They can't do anything lawfully. So anyhow, what have we got for the people in relationship to what we're doing with all this information we gather? How are we helping Oregonians out with this? Are we doing the best we can do? Sometimes I think we are. Sometimes I think we're just kicking ass. Then other times it really makes me wonder. Especially when, go ahead.
Oh, you're going to say especially. Go ahead.
Especially when we have a fighter like Cheryl in the hospital.
Yes. Yes. I think the thing that's unfortunate is that we do comply far too easily and not ask or even challenge any authority. And if we do, it's only verbal and out of anger. Little action is taken that's lawful. And then, of course, there's the whole issue of lawful because who makes the laws, who makes the rules that we're supposed to live by. And it is the legislators that we end up having to feel up against and people accept them as being the legitimate lawmakers. And they're serving the corporation. They're not serving the people.
Well,
So
I'd like to say that the law is different than the legal system. I think there's plenty of law. I haven't dug through every piece of the Constitution of Oregon here, but I've read a lot of it. And at what point do you say that we've had enough? They're just piling more policy procedure over the top of other ones, like the whole cell phone while driving is already covered by distracted driving, in the same, ORS, so but we hire these people, or we elect them in, I guess, to make law, and whether we need law or not, we hired them to do it, and they're going to make it. I think that they have a lot of their own agendas, especially the corporations. Their agenda is to make more and more money at the cost of our freedom, to try to do it as secretively as possible. And sometimes I guess it looks like they're doing it right in front of us and we're not seeing it. And I think maybe they get a kick out of that part. But there's no reason to have so many laws that when you walk out of your house and spend the day out there in the world, that you've broken, maybe 10 or 20 laws and don't even realize this. It's absurd. Any person should know what's right or wrong walking down the street or across the street, going into a market or not. There shouldn't be like, oh my God, you're supposed to have a mask on. Didn't you know that? All this kind of weird stuff. And it's been going on for a long time. It's just come, out in our face boldly in the past year and a half.
Well, I'd like to address the whole educational system because, first of all, we're supposed to be taught the Constitution. This is a privilege, an amazing God-given privilege that we have, the Fifth Amendment, to learn the Constitution and know the founding of our country. Countries don't have the Constitution that we have. We have so many privileges or rights or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you call it for, upholding the law for the sake of the people. And, until we teach our children, and I hold the teachers' unions largely responsible for this. I think that our voting has got to be cleaned up. I think people tend to feel that if they vote, that's enough. But then there's the whole social justice issue. People feel like, well, if they're out in the streets, parading for one cause or another, rather than actually looking at what is really going on relative to freedom and human rights. And human rights isn't necessarily in the purview of social justice. Can be, it is to some minds, but social justice to me is justice. It's just everyone, justice for everyone, not a specific group that has to be favored more or less or whatever. So I think educators need to be aware of these things that we're talking about, the definitions, who we are, the Constitution, and teaching that again. Yes.
The communists said it in their doctrine that you take over the schools, which they did, and then you train up a generation or two, which they did, and then it only takes one generation to completely wipe out everything that came before if you don't teach it. There's a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. I can remember one of them right now. I remember both of them. One of them was Ray, who's listening now, and I'm going to speak for him, and he can interrupt me if I'm wrong. But Ray worked as a volunteer for the Washington County Election Board or Committee, and for quite a while. And one year, he was running the vote counting machine, and they told him that he could stop counting votes now. He says, "Yeah, but I'm not finished." And they said, "That's okay, Ray. We have a statistical winner. Stop counting." Yeah, every vote counts. And the next one was I was tried for carrying a no trespass while in possession of a firearm, which is different from trespass and all kinds of stuff. So I had to go read and find out what it was that I was really charged with. And so Richard taught me all this stuff then. Uh, look up the law, then you go to the archives and you have them pull it up, and they go get a box full of everything that the committee and the legislature used to make that law. And they get it and they bring it to you. And I read the whole thing, everything. One group, and there was only one name on the letter of the group, and he could have printed up the letterhead and the whole thing all by himself. It was a name like the Northwest Cattle Growers Association or some similar name to that. And they wanted a law for people who were trespassing on their land, their ranches, their farms with rifles while they're hunting and not wanting to get off the land when the farmer or the rancher says, get off the land. And they wanted it to be stiffer and more stringent if you were on their land and wouldn't leave and you were carrying a gun. One man for one association testified for that, and the legislators went for it. And they talked it all over and they passed it and they passed it on. It went through both houses and everybody agreed and they made it a law. They made it a law with one person asking for it to become a law, representing one association that had only one name on the letter. And then they took what the legislature passed and they gave it to legislative council, and legislative council wrote the Oregon revised statute, and it looks nothing like what the legislature passed. That's what happens to our law.
Mhm.
I yield.
So maybe this is a good time to talk about color of law.
Go for it.
Well, I'm an artist. So I would just say that, when you start with a canvas and you have a nice pristine canvas and you have a lot of planning in your mind about how you want to conceptualize this image that you're creating, which could be our country, right? In the beginning. And you establish certain guidelines and you make the construction, and you do the whole composition in initial sketching, and it's pretty simple. It's not involved, not a lot of color in it at all, but it's just there. And then as you go along, you start adding more and more things. And pretty soon it's layers and layers and layers of different colors. And that's a happy vision of what color of law is. But I would say it's pretty accurate in terms of how the layers get developed in terms of the use of words and ideas and impositions of power.
Yeah. Basically, it becomes something that can be really way more precise of what you were intending, or it could actually be completely different. I've heard of stories where they've like scratched off or observed inner layers of old paintings and seen that it was actually a whole completely different scene or a person sitting there, and now it's a scenery of a forest or something. But
That's
you can completely change
paintimento.
to be something else. And
Yeah, the word for
and
that
that's
is
what I'm really
paintimento.
concerned with us constantly tinkering with this. I was paying a lot of attention to the usarepublic.net people, and they wanted to go some weird, or well, at least some of the people want to go some weird direction called dynamic law or something like that, where it could just change, and that doesn't make any sense to me. When you have some pretty basic rules like freedom of speech, freedom of guns or firearms or whatever you want to call them, um, freedom of privacy. I mean, how can we even dig into those basic rules? And you see this color law going over the top of this stuff, and before long, you can't even see those pieces in there inside their ORSs or whatever they have in their other states. It's kind of horrible. I don't wish to even want to subscribe to dynamic law where we can just change it on a whim. How many years does it have to go by over our lifetime to figure out that we've already got it? Here we go in Portland. Now they've dropped all the speed limits down 10 and 15 miles an hour. And what made them think in 2021 that we needed to drop a speed limit down from 45 down to 30 miles an hour after probably 50 or 60 years? I've been living here for over 30, and the speed limit was just fine at 45, and now you want to drop it to 30. What made them make that decision? Did something change? I haven't seen anything change in my area to make that kind of happen. So it's almost like they're tinkering with it to either irritate or God, I hate to even understand, I guess.
They're
Ron?
doing it to make more money, William.
Well, I kind of thought that too, but I don't see the officers out there. This is Portland. There used to be officers out there, 5 or 10 years ago, but for some reason we have these riots or whatever they want to call riots downtown that have scared the police to go home or something. I'm not seeing the officers pulling people over. Now I see them popping up with these photo radar scenarios and sending tickets through the mail, but I'm not seeing any officers out there trying to, gather more money, that way. Maybe they're too scared, and that's why they have to have a camera now.
I hope they're scared. I really do. I really hope that they're afraid enough to stop it. That would be delightful. But what I think they're doing is just what you said. They line up a lot of vans taking cameras and photo radar, and he who can be deceived, let him. And it costs them $1.95 to write the ticket using a volunteer cop sitting in the little van, and plus postage, and they can maybe pick up $400 or $500.
Yeah,
exactly. That's a really good investment on their part.
Yeah, if anybody's watching this outside our state, it's not an exaggeration. You run one red light in this city, and it's $270.
Yeah, there's also the whole thing that's happening with Robocops. I think that it's not going to be long before we have robot cops. There's a whole shift that's happening with mechanical and transhumanism that is really something we seriously need to be considering and looking at, because there are those who are already in that place of that planning.
Yeah, and, if anybody's seen those robot kind of dog-like things, those things are freaking scary.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
And they're real. They're not Robocop from what was it, the early 90s or whatever it was, where it was all fiction. This is reality. These things, you can't even knock them over, right? You shove them and they'll actually scoot off to the side and they can catch their balance. And they're not toppling like you know, a stick or something. They're really there and they're aggressive.
Well, also, I will just mention that the whole surveillance thing is serious because we're a 6 feet apart culture now. And that is by design, because we know that when we're in a mob of people, it's much more difficult for them to see us from the satellite images. And so these are all things that a lot of people are not even considering. It's all about COVID, but it's not. This is a global plan that is, you know, it involves eugenics, it involves surveillance, it involves biological data, it involves taking our DNA, it involves eugenics against particular cultures of people. We know that. Some of us do. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't make all those connections, but it is all connected, every bit of it. And so when we look at evil versus good, and we call in our creator to protect our republic and to protect the people and to protect our assembly of people who are working for the people, this is critical. We don't deserve to have governance. We're too good for that. But people need to be paying attention. We're good human people.
Yep, that's right. And under the self-governance, you know, I give the example to a lot of people about self-governance. If you get pulled over by that so-called authority officer there, do you have control over yourself? Do you have control over your words? Do you actually know the words that you're supposed to use in that circumstance? And that can be determine whether or not you're self-governed or not. And if you're not self-governed, that officer is going to govern you. You know, and the same thing happens inside that courtroom. If you're freaking out like a madman in the middle of the courtroom, are you self-governed? And if you're not, he'll call the sheriff in there to take care of you. He'll govern you for the night, you know? So, you know, people really need to understand that you want your freedom, yes, but you got to be self-governed. Otherwise, they're going to take your freedom away.
Well, it's also important to not agree that you understand anything they're telling you, because what they're telling you is not what we think we're hearing. So when they ask you, do you understand? You never do. We do not no, I don't understand.
That's right. And that's why we're doing this TV show, is to educate people. We started out the show with some definitions, and, you know, you really need to know these words. And sometimes we're better off not talking, especially if we don't fully understand, fully comprehend. I don't even know that.
Understand. Yeah, I know.
You know, it's hard to talk around those people. And when you get flustered like that, just stop. And that's your best bet, you know. And you know, maybe back off and think about what they're saying and what they're trying to do. And you know, they go, well, you can get in trouble if you lie to me. Well, you know, if you're not talking, you're not lying to them, you know.
There's a thing that we can all practice, which is center point. Because if we're in fear or we're in anger, we are disempowered. We're in power when we're self-governed and we're at center point, when we're in balance and we can actually speak our mind with our heart into some kind of reactivity. Most people, and even persons, will deal with a person who is reasonable. If we're reasonable and have normal conversation without all of the anger and hostility or fear, and we just hold a stable position, most likely anything we say is not going to be held against us if we're simply center point. And call in higher power, call in support and protection from our Creator. We're not alone.
That's right. And you know, some of these officers and judges out there, you know, they're having a freaking bored day and they wish for something to be escalated so that they can get their adrenaline, you know. So we have to watch out for that part too. But being center is the key to self-governance. You're right.
Yeah, I think, when we conduct business anywhere, we want to act with maturity and groundedness. That's the only way we're going to find success. Emotional charges do not really do anything but fuel other like responses.
And the more we understand our stance, the words to use, the better off we are going into a store where they're requiring masks. If you are, not angry about it, but you're coming across and you're talking in the lawful manner that we talk about here, the person at the front desk right there coming into the door, they might just feel, oh wow, this person knows a lot. I should probably just be quiet and let them get their business done, and then they'll be out of here, and then I can, ask the next person to wear a mask, or whatever, and they'll just leave us alone.
Yeah.
From your
Instead of
mouth
calling
to
you
God's
ready to
ear.
freak out.
Well, I did hear on the news that they're not going to restart the mask requirement for all of Oregon because this is according to the Oregon Health Authority that I heard last night on local news, because they're concerned about too much kickback, that there will be too many people who refuse to wear a mask. And I think that's true, because once it's been taken away and people realize that all of the cross-referencing lies and stories that are being, and the censorship that's being told and not told, limited, is really influencing a lot of people and enlightening them as to what's really going on. And we're not going to take it.
Yeah, that's right. And if they see too much of that, they don't want to wake up the rest of the sleeping populace by a few rebellious people in their eyes about not wearing the mask. So they're going to just kick back and just wait. And, if they do something, they're going to do it big time next time. But they're not going to just slowly creep it back in again. It's not going to work for them.
Well, the other concern I have, the greatest concern I have, is for our children. And the fact that they are going to be required K through 8, I think it is, in all federal buildings, they're going to be required to wear masks. This is not okay. It's psychologically damaging, not to mention their health. And I will say that I heard from someone, I won't say who, that children are drawing faces now without mouths. So doesn't that tell us something? This is not okay for the psychology of our children. Children learn by tactile. They learn how to write with kinesiology. They learn how to speak by watching us speak. They learn about emotions by seeing our smiles and our frowns. These are psychologically damaging tools that are being imposed on our children in our educational system. And I think that we really, if as an assembly I could do anything, I would wish that we would do something about that. I'd love for us to notice the Portland Public School System. Actually, I would like to propose that we notice them.
Yeah, we should. Absolutely. I second that. I'm concerned with the hearing impaired.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What are they reading now?
Yeah.
They can't read our lips anymore if we're wearing a mask. That had to been really horrible, more deafening world than they already had. Now they can't read the lips of the people. And I was irritated out there. I wasn't wearing my mask around, maybe about a handful of times out in public with a mask on because of certain circumstances. But I would say, hey, I can't hear you. Even if I could hear them, I would say, I can't hear you. Speak up. Pull your mask off. I can't hear you. And I would insist on that because it was so damn irritating to me that I couldn't see their mouth.
Yeah. It's inhuman.
Yeah.
That's part of the deal.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. When people wake up and realize what is being done to humanity in this total shutdown and reconfiguration of our cultures worldwide, if they could just stop, take a breath, and look at the devastation of us psychologically, physically, emotionally and economically. On every level, this has been the most amazingly successful and disturbing control system that they've imposed on us.
Oh,
Human
yeah.
beings. Now, this is not imposed on us by human beings. Otherwise, if they really were people, if they really had the full complement of human emotions and connection to creator and to beauty and to love, this would not be happening. And those who are allowing it need to really seriously check in with who they belong to. Who are they? Are they with God, with creator, or are they with them?
True. Some people ask us, when are we going to get your correction? When are we going to get our republic back? And it's, hey, wait a second. It's right there in the beginning. It says we have all the power. So it's when the people stand up is when it's going to get back. So stand up.
Yeah, it's not about the president or the vice president or the prime minister or whoever it is. It's not about that.
There's
It's
no
us.
superheroes.
We're the ones who are suffering from the impositions of our humanity. So rise up.
Please.
Rise up with strength and love and the power that's inherent in our God-given selves, in our spirit, in our soul. And
I
with
don't
that, I
think we
yield.
can tap. I don't think we can top that. Let's close this up. What do you say?
Sounds good to
Thank
me.
you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, William.
To everyone.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Go to our YouTube channel. Visit our Facebook channol. Our YouTube channel is
RSJA.org.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
They do not want to let go of this. They do not intend on losing here. And we do not intend giving it back to them.
And then the bullets started flying. Then he jumps out of the car, and he's got both his hands up. And he got out of the car, and he had his hands in the air. He's like, "Just shoot me then. This is what you want, to shoot me." And they did. They shot him dead. With his hands in the air, and I saw it. I swear to God. He was just walking with his hands in the air. And they shot him. And they shot him dead, and then after he was down on the ground, they shot him 3 more times.